parcouru par notre histoire, de l'Ancien Régime à la libération de Paris, de la Révolution française, de la France, que le monde regarde. Vive la République! Vive la France!
Ladies and gentlemen, France was one of the richest nations in the world. And unlike other countries where only the rich enjoy the wealth of the nation, in France, the middle class lived a royal life that no other country could imagine.
Paris, the city of life, of gaiety, of pleasure. The joy of living. Whatever one's pleasure, it can be found in Paris.
France has long stood as a symbol of culture, art and intellect.
France became a mass consumption society, with entire families spending weekends strolling around the household art shows.
Their life was so cool that the government had mandated 4 weeks of paid vacation. And even if you were born poor, government's elite education system and massive industrial projects guaranteed you a great life and great income. At the same time, the French industries were so far ahead of the world that they co-built Airbus, they co-built Concorde, the fastest commercial jet in history, and they also dominated the luxury market of the world.
Air France took delivery and the orders start to roll in as the Airbus story accelerates.
Concorde, the fastest airliner on Earth.
It was in a league of its own.
It is an icon of speed.
In a major new development, fashion shows were becoming veritable media extravaganzas. Fashion lovers flocked to the shows as much to be seen as to see.
At the same time, their economic progress was so crazy that their per capita income shot up by 12 times. 12 times from 1960 to 1980. This was the French economic dream of the 1980s. But you know what? From the 1980s onwards, the French politicians started playing a very dangerous game. A game so costly that today, France is in trouble.
France's political stability is crumbling. Soaring national debt,
Swelling pension bills,
high unemployment,
Government protesters clashed with police.
and shrinking tax revenue.
At a time of vulnerability for the French economy.
Today, France has become so poor that 1 in 3 French people report that they can no longer afford to eat 3 healthy meals a day. 18 to 19% of the youth are unemployed, and the per capita GDP of France has stagnated since 2008. That's almost 18 long years. And today, France is infested with crime, protests, and riots. The question is, what exactly went wrong with the French economic miracle, and what are the lessons that the world needs to learn from the fall of France?
France's political stability is crumbling.
It has very high public debt levels, above 100% to GDP. Emmanuel Macron's plans to curb the country's skyrocketing debt.
This video is brought to you by Emergent AI. You know, every time a geopolitical crisis emerges, the smartest investors and business owners ask the exact same question. Which industries are about to boom and which industries are going to bleed? For example, when the Russia-Ukraine conflict started, the supply chain of sunflower oil was choked. As a result, the palm oil industry got boosted and palm oil sellers and investors both made millions of dollars. But with thousands of news updates flooding in every single day, it becomes practically impossible to do market research, right? So you know what? We built our own tool called the Risk Impact Analyzer using Emergent. In this tool, all you have to do is just type the industry you want to analyze, and this tool instantly reads the most credible global news, connects the dots, and gives you a detailed breakdown on how a crisis is impacting that specific sector. And you know what? I built this tool without knowing how to code. And yet, I was able to build this entire working application in minutes using Emergent AI without needing an expensive developer and without spending months on a prototype. All I did was describe the logic I wanted in plain English, and Emergent's AI agents handled the front end, back end, and deployed it instantly. Today, over 6 million builders are using Emergent to launch game-changing products, from supply chain trackers to automated customer service bots. So do you realize Emergent gives you the extraordinary ability to build your own tech without needing to code and without needing expensive developers? So if you've been sitting on a startup idea or a tool that could help your business, don't let the "I don't know how to code" excuse stop you. Click the link in the description, use Emergent AI and start building today. By the way, I've also left the exact prompt I used for the Impact Analyzer in the description. So if you found it useful, use the prompt and build an analyzer using Emergent. To understand the French economic disaster, you need to understand the 3 economic sins that France committed which no other country should commit. This is a story that dates back to 1973. Until this time, 3 things had happened. Number 1, the French economy had recovered from World War II. Number 2, in 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out between Israel, Egypt and Syria. And number 3, when the United States supported Israel in this war, the oil countries became extremely angry and they increased the price of oil from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel in 1974. So when the oil price shot up by 300%, the price of goods and services shot up in every part of the world. So German and French citizens were shocked by the drastic increase in prices. It was so bad that French government practically banned TV broadcasts after 11 p.m. The government also legally capped heaters at 19 degrees and Germany had to ban driving on Sundays just to save gas. This happened to both Germany and France. But this is where Germany and France opted for 2 completely different strategies to fix their economy. Let's understand this using an example. Let's say due to oil prices, in 1975, the cost of electricity to run the factory has just doubled. Let's assume that the old cost to make a coffee maker was $50 and the new cost due to energy spike is $60. So the factory now is in danger. If they raise the price of the coffee maker, no one will buy the machine. And if they don't, then the company will go bankrupt because the profits will vanish. So all the workers will lose their jobs. But here's what the Germans did. In 1975, Germany said, listen guys, inflation is high, we understand. But we will accept a 6% pay raise this year even if inflation was 7% last year. This way, the factory can survive and we can get a pay hike next year or the year after that. At the same time, the German government said, we will not raise the taxes on the businesses so that those businesses could invest in their machines and become more efficient. So the German factories got upgraded and they could afford to sell their coffee maker for about $65. Eventually, the consumers could afford it, the factory could generate revenue, and when the economy recovered, they increased sales and worker wages both. But in the exact same situation, here's how France reacted. The French had a law called the sliding scale of wages. This law said that the wages were automatically linked to inflation because workers are very, very important. For example, every time the price of bread, gas or rent went up by 2%, the minimum wage automatically went up by 2% to match it. So due to the oil crisis, if the price of oil went up by 10% and inflation shot up by 10%, the wages of the workers must also go up by 10%. Sounds amazing, isn't it? So the French factories had to give the workers a 10% hike to help with inflation. But the moment they increased worker wages, the price of making a coffee maker in France went up to $75. Secondly, while the German government printed money very, very carefully, the French printed money recklessly. While Germany aimed for 8% increase in money supply through printing, France's money supply grew by 18% to 20% in 1975. Because they thought if they print more money, citizens will have more money and this money will lead to more consumption. As a result, the French companies can generate healthy revenue. So at the end of the day, while a French coffee maker cost $75, the German coffee maker only cost $65. Now think about it. If a retail store like Walmart comes to buy 10,000 units, which coffee maker do you think Walmart will buy? Obviously the German coffee maker, right? Well, that is how, while the German factories were able to sell their goods all across the world, the French companies could not sell because their goods were costly. Eventually, once the Germans had enough cash flow, they hired more workers, they gave them hikes and life was good. Whereas the French workers had no jobs because the French factories were struggling. In fact, since the French products were expensive, even the French people switched to buying German products. And look, in 1972, France and Germany both were exporting nations. While France had a trade surplus of $2.42 billion, Germany had a surplus of $8.2 billion. But after 1974, while France collapsed into deficit, Germany became an export superpower. By 1977, while France was losing $2.8 billion to imports, Germany was making $19.23 billion with exports. And you will be shocked to know that from 1980 to 2007, France lost 36% of its industrial workforce. And by the way, after 1981, to make it worse, the French government even reduced the legal work week from 40 hours to 39 hours. And they also dropped the retirement age from 65 to 60 because they thought work-life balance is important, and if people retire early, maybe the factories don't have to pay them at all. So while the French people were chilling with their wine, the Germans were toiling in their factory to boost the economy. And then came shock number 2, the Chinese shock.
Deng Xiaoping radically shifted China's economy.
As the economy opened up to the outside world, companies flooded into China to build factories and take advantage of cheap labor.
It quickly became the world's manufacturing hub.
Long story short, in 1978, the Chinese economy opened up, because of which China started to build thousands of factories which produced ultra-cheap goods at scale. And suddenly, Chinese factories were flooding the globe with products that were much cheaper than anything made in Germany or France. So for France and Germany, this was the survival of the fittest moment. And once again, they made two completely opposite choices. By the year 2000, Germany was actually in worse shape than France. People called it the sick man of Europe. Unemployment was high, labor laws were so stiff that companies didn't want to hire anyone, and the economy was in a bad shape. But then they did something absolutely crazy. Between 2003 and 2005, they made 3 very painful changes. Firstly, they made it easier for companies to hire part-time workers through something called mini jobs. Secondly, they cut long-term unemployment benefits. So if you were healthy and you were offered a job, you had to either take it or you lost your check. This pushed the workers to take a job even if it was low paying. At the same time, it saved the government a lot of money. And thirdly, German workers agreed to take little wage hikes for many years. In return, the companies kept the factories in Germany instead of moving them to China. Now, this might seem a little difficult and weird to socialists, but do you realize, with the Chinese labor competing in the global market, the German companies only had 2 options. Either it was low wage hikes or no jobs at all. So it was a bitter medicine, but it worked because the competition was absolutely crazy. And while Germany was making its workers cheaper and more flexible, France decided to do the exact opposite. In the year 2000, France officially shortened the work week from 39 hours to 35 hours. But they kept the pay the same. This idea was brilliant in theory. If people work less, companies will have to hire more people to get the work done. So more jobs for everyone, right? But here's what actually happened. Because the French labor was now expensive and less productive, French factories could not compete with Chinese products. In fact, they couldn't even compete with German factories. And lastly, France made it a nightmare to fire people. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that developed countries make. Look at this. In Germany, if you fired an employee, you had to pay them 0.5 months of salary for every year worked. So if you need to fire a guy who worked at your factory for 10 years, you had to pay 6 months of salary. No court, no legal trouble. But in France, if you fired someone, you had to pay 2 things. Firstly, you had to pay the official severance of 25% of a month's salary per year worked, which was okay. But if the worker sued you in the labor court, the judge had the power to decide if your reason was real and serious to fire that person. And if the judge thought it is unfair, he could make the company pay 24 months, 30 months, or even 4 years of salary. So, a small bakery firing a bad employee could be hit with a €100,000 fine 3 years later. Now, do you realize this would make any business owner paranoid? So again, due to such terrible labor laws, France began losing its factories at a terrifying rate. Between 2000 to 2016, German industrial output grew by 25%. But in the exact same period, French industrial output shrank by 3%. While Germany was building more cars, more machines and more chemicals every year, France was effectively getting rid of industries. By 2020, manufacturing accounted for just 9 to 10% of France's GDP. as compared to 18 to 19% for Germany. And by 2008, building a product in France was 18% more expensive than building the exact same product in Germany. And this gap of 20% was the death zone, because of which France consistently recorded 50,000 to 60,000 corporate bankruptcies, whereas in Germany, this number was between 20,000 to 30,000 bankruptcies. And to make matters worse, the 2008 crisis shocked the world and the French economy.
Europe is in a recession.
What is now a double-dip contraction for the French economy spells more trouble.
Euro area's largest deficit, massive debt, and every attempt at reform has ended the same way.
It really is an unprecedented crisis.
Now, to stop a Great Depression, the European Central Bank did something absolutely crazy. They cut the interest rates to just 1.5%. And by now, you know the pattern. While the Germans let the citizens and the market feel the pain early, adjust their behavior and become more efficient, the French government uses the government's credit card to pretend as if the pain doesn't exist. So while Germany is like an athlete that feels the pain and recovers naturally, France is like an athlete who takes painkillers instead of training. Eventually, the painkillers stop working and the body collapses. That is exactly what happened after 2008, when the central bank dropped the interest rates to 1.5%. German Chancellor Angela Merkel implemented the Black Zero policy. This meant that the government spending was strictly capped, and they used their savings from low interest rates to pay their own old national debt. So Germany's debt to GDP ratio fell from 82% in 2010 to 59% in 2019. But France was busy spending money in freebies. Look at this. To cap electricity bills, the French government spent 75 billion euros over 3 years. In 2018, protests forced the government to hand out 17 billion euros in immediate tax cuts and wage bonuses. After COVID, the French government paid nearly 100% of private salaries and spent 35 billion euros in the first year alone. In total, the French government spent 150 to 200 billion euros from 2018 to 2024 in COVID relief and handouts. And then came the last sin of all, the pension crisis, because of which riots broke out in 2023. Now look at the math. While France spends roughly 14% on pensions, Germany spends 10%, the US spends only 5.2%, and even Switzerland spends 6.5% of its GDP in pensions. In 2000s, there were 2.1 workers paying for every retired person. But by 2020, that ratio had fallen to 1.7, and now it is racing towards 1.2. So each citizen in France is practically paying for a retired person in France. So today, the French youth wants to leave the country, unemployment is rising, French industries are not able to grow as fast as the Germans, and the economy in general is coming to a standstill. That is how France got into trouble. And now I'm very excited to see how Macron is going to bring France back on track. And this story teaches us 3 very, very important lessons. Lesson number 1, short-term pain is always better than long-term debt. Number 2, many times good long-term policies will be painful for people. But if the government decides to please the people instead of making them resilient, disaster will strike for sure. Not immediately, but surely in a decade or 2. And last and most importantly, we all need to understand that the freebie strategy is the best way to win votes, but it is the worst way to build a nation. So if our politicians hand out freebies, we must stop them, because it's going to get them votes, but it's going to destroy our economy. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please hit the like button. And for more such economic and business case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.